Good morning, everyone. I'm Kevin Allen, joined by my usual broadcast partner, former NHL defenseman Tom Laidlaw, played 11 seasons for the New York Rangers and Los Angeles Kings. This is the Laidlaw and Allen Report. We come to you twice a week to talk all things hockey, plus some other events in our lives, including Tom's cooking and his exercise regimen. There's always a lot going on with Tom Laidlaw. But, Tom, let's start in the hockey world, because big news last night. Max Pacioretty has reportedly suffered a serious Achilles injury and will be out 6 months. And, that's one of the reasons I was really bullish about the Hurricanes this year, the idea that, maybe he was going to come in and be kind of a missing piece type player, one more player, but he's had bad luck with injuries. No doubt about it.
Yeah. So he was not hurt at the time of the trade. He just got hurt recently and needs a surgery. Is that?
Yeah, I'm assuming. Otherwise, I don't think the Carolina Hurricanes would have made that deal. But I actually have a text message into your good friend and mine, Don Waddell, the general manager of the Carolina Hurricanes. I'd like to write about that today and get his take on it all. I'm sure that's very disappointing.
Yeah. But you know what, though? So let's say he misses the first half of the season. It's one of those deals. Like, I still think they're good enough to have, obviously, a good season to get into the playoffs. And then it's like you're adding like an all-star player once he comes back. So,
and I got to be honest, and you'll be able to be much better than I would. Like we've talked before, like it's been my observation that when players come back in 4 to 6 months after an ACL, or they're really not the same for a year. Like, they're back and they're playing. So I don't know about Achilles. I just haven't. That hasn't registered with me. What's your thought?
That is an excellent point. You don't come back and just, unless you're like one of these really elite, well, he's a pretty elite athlete. He's definitely not. Usually you come back, and that initial comeback, you're all fired up, you're excited, you've missed this half of the season, now you're ready to go. Then you kind of fall into that little bit of a malaise, right? And then it takes you a while to get going again. So, obviously he's a top 6 forward, but I still like that Carolina team a lot, even if they hadn't have made that trade to get him. So I still think they'll be okay. It's that old thing that everybody else is going to play better now, right? The Tom Laidlaw theory.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, Tom, he's about to go down the path as there will be a better team without Max Pacioretty. I agree with you, Tom, on that Carolina team. I don't think he was the end all. That team is very good, was very good, is going to, and there's like Aho is going to be better. He's still a younger man in terms of he's still going to improve. Certainly, Svechnikov's going to improve. To be honest with you, I'm going to say disappointed is too strong a word, but I thought he would be at a higher level than he is. He's really darn good, but I really thought, he was going to be Ovechkin-like, that he would flirt with 50 goals, every season. He's really
edge to his game too. He's like Ovechkin. He's got an edge to his game.
Yeah, that's why, I'm hesitant to say that disappointing, because he's been a very good player. But I guess, with some guys, you just see him and you really expect more.
That goes on here with Chris Kreider too. They still, although he got the 52 goals this year, but pretty much his whole career is always like, Jesus, more there, which is it's tough because he's still a fantastic player. It's just that you always, how great an athlete he is. You always want more from him. So, yeah.
Speaking of Chris Kreider, I was watching the World Juniors, which I really enjoy, and to have it in the summer feels like a bonus for me. To be able to watch some hockey and to see it's almost like a preview of coming attractions. It's like going to the movies, watching the trailers, because not all these players, the top players. We're going to see them in the NHL over the next 3 or 4 years. They're going to start arriving and start, having an impact. But I saw a clip of actually, I think it was on the NHL Network walk-up to the tournament. I think it was the pre-game show, and they had clips of successful things. I don't know what the title of the list was, but they had Jonathan Toews scoring, consecutive shootout goals to, get Canada into the final, and all those kind of things. And then they had this great clip and of the U.S. team in a pregame locker room, all gathered, sitting around the table as one of the players, and I didn't recognize him, unfortunately, led them in a chant. It was kind of, and it ended with, and we're going to go out and kick their pant, and they bleeped it, But when I was watching that, I was thinking, that's why I really like the World Juniors, because there's still an innocence about that tournament. Like, it's a big time tournament with a lot of pressure, and these kids all understand that you make hay by playing well at the World Juniors. But in that moment, when they're all gathered around, like that really was, like a celebration of just the game, the fun, the camaraderie, the nationalistic pride as these guys, getting the beat on the table, and then, responding to the chant, what was going on. And I don't know. I watched that and I thought, that's why we all should tune into the World Junior Championship, because, boy, that's just pure, the romantic side of hockey. So anyway, if anybody else saw that, I wonder if they had the same reaction to it. But I really enjoyed seeing that.
Real honor to get selected for that thing too. It's really become that big of a tournament, right? For hopefully for your career, heading to the National Hockey League, but just to represent your country in a big tournament like that too. So it is, it's weird because it's kind of like a Christmas tradition that's usually played at Christmas. To have it now during the summer is different.
Yeah, and and it's interesting because it's a different tradition than we have in America. In America, over the holidays, when the kids come home from college, or they've moved away and they come back and they get 10 days off at Christmas, they come and sit. In America, it's the bowl season.
Yeah.
You watch college bowls, but you're right, in Canada. And the percentage, and I don't have it at my disposal, but the percentage of the number of people who watch that tournament, in Canada, a country of 30 million, something in that neighborhood, is really remarkable. Like really remarkable.
Even if you're just a casual hockey fan, it becomes a real family event. Everybody, right? It's like a bowl game. Everybody sitting around. They have meals prepared for it. The whole big. Yeah, it's a big deal. Yeah. Yeah,
and I wonder too, with all that's going on in the news now, with Team Canada, I wonder if there's been, maybe not, but would the kids say to themselves, there's been a stain here on Hockey Canada, and we need to remind people that not all players are alike, not all years are the same, and for our group, we're the way it used to be, where it's about the competition and so forth. So it'll be interesting to see what their reaction is to all that. And I know, Team Canada, Hockey Canada, not Team Canada, because the current players are not under the microscope, but Hockey Canada is under the microscope now. Like, they got to be better, no doubt, than what they've been in the past. So really, and I'm really looking forward to this tournament. I don't really understand the players who chose not to compete. I intellectually, I do, like if you're a top player and you're going to your first training camp, and you're trying to make it, what if you get hurt in the World Junior Championship? I mean, that's a legitimate concern. This is an intense team. However, interesting on players' perspectives. Simon Edvinsson in Detroit. The projection is he's going to play. He's going to step in like Moritz Seider did and be an impact player. And he didn't even consider not going.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah, he's there. He's at the World Junior Championships. And, there are other players as well. McTavish for Canada. He's going to play on the Ducks, for sure. For sure he's going to play on the Ducks. And he's there. He's not worried about it.
I'd be interested to see those conversations between the general manager, the player, the agent, the family. Yeah, I guess in some cases, I'm kind of just guessing like a Steve Yzerman. Would he say, okay, yeah, you're going to risk getting hurt, but you're going to risk getting hurt playing in the National Hockey League too, right? I think the experience. So if you think that player is going to come in and play in the National Hockey League, think about that world-class experience he gets in a hockey game, fighting for his country. I guess I'd be saying, yeah, I want my guys to go. Yeah, I know. I think they're going to play in the NHL too. Yeah.
Well, you just did a good overview of the Yzerman attitude, because he did say that. He did say last year, he just said, with all due respect, but I hope Sebastian Cossa wins the Memorial Cup, and I hope all my Swedish players win their championships. He thinks all of that is important. And, he clearly endorsed the idea that the Red Wings have 9 players at the World Junior Tournament. And he clearly, but they're missing one, which surprises me. The guy that isn't there is Marco Kasper, who's their number 1 pick, who would have been Austria's best player, I'm guessing. And he's not there. So he was there in the winter. So
you decided not to go. Well, that's interesting. Well, I wonder if the U.S. player that was around the table there was Jacob Trouba. Did he play for the World Juniors? You see yesterday he got named captain of the New York Rangers. See that?
Yeah, no, yeah. I wanted to get to that. Are we done with this? I'm just trying to think if there was anything else, but okay. But let's go before we go to Trouba. I want to go to Sidney Crosby. Turned 35. Yeah. I remember him when he was at Rimouski. It was a big deal. It was a big deal, and I remember going up to doing a story up there for USA Today and meeting him at 16. And I remember a conversation we had about, what was the struggle being Sidney Crosby? Because as I've mentioned before, I think on this podcast, I've certainly said it on other radio shows, and it was sort of like a miniature version of what happened to the Beatles in the 60s when they started appearing in America. Like, you had these arenas where, after the game, there'd be just a throng of people waiting for Sidney to come out of the arena to get autographs. And I asked him about, what that was like. And he goes, really, seriously, this is what I think about. I've somehow got to balance. I've got to balance, my responsibility to the game, to kind of serve the game and to deal with the fans and to respond to the fans, because they're the game. I got to balance that with, I don't want to inconvenience my teammates. They didn't sign up for this, and I want to make sure that I'm not delaying them to get back home and to do all things. So he said that's been my struggle, to find that balance. And I thought, wow.
16 years old.
16 years old, and he's already figured that. What it reminded me of, Wayne Gretzky.
I was just going to say the same thing. They're understanding at a very young age what their impact is on the game, on the fans, everything with the game. The way they carry themselves, so careful not to get in any trouble. That's amazing. I don't think you've ever told me that story. That was an interesting story that he said.
Yeah, well. And what I find interesting about this, and I'm going to just reveal right up front, I really like Sidney. I've known him a long time. I find him to be very, very classy. He's very competitive, so I'm sure he does some things that that we don't always appreciate. But I think his heart is always in the right spot. I think he's always pro team. He's always pro sport. Much like Wayne Gretzky, he tries to say the right thing. Yep. He tries not to create controversy, but he does it all with the best intentions. And I remember at one point where he shot a water bottle. He was mad, and he shot a water bottle in the direction of a referee. And in the back of my head said, if Tom Wilson did that, what would the reaction have been? But with Sidney, nothing happened to Sidney Crosby when he did it. So, so
I think I think that's okay. I really do. I think
I do too.
He's earned it. Yeah, definitely. Wayne Gretzky snapped a couple of times, and
Right.
briefly, but more when he did one time during the game, the famous Detroit game when Robbie Vittori benched him. But it was rare that it happened, and he did it because he was mad at himself because he turned the puck over and they went down and scored on us. So yeah, that's the thing. Like even when Wayne had those long shifts, and Sidney has those long shifts too. You never say to yourself, "Man, that's selfish." You always say to yourself, "You know what? He's doing it because he thinks he's really got something going. It's really going to help the team." And most players wouldn't say that. I mean, like I remember the famous game. Was it Mike Keenan with the Rangers? Kovalev wouldn't pass the puck, so he kept putting. Wouldn't come off the ice, so he kept putting. No, he just kept saying, "No, stay on, stay on." I don't think the guys tell the story. It's kind of funny. And I thought obviously Mike Keenan was trying to teach Kovalev a lesson, but I think the guys all said Kovalev loved it. He just wanted to stay on the ice.
Yeah, no, like where were you before when I was trying to get 2 minutes? Yeah. Well, yeah, I mean, and Crosby, what I've admired about him through his career, it became kind of a running thing with us. Every fall, I would go to do my training camp Sidney Crosby story because he was one of the few players that you put his name in the headline and everybody read the story, because he was that thing. And every year he would work on something different. And that would be what I would write about. And he worked, I remember one year it was face-offs, and he turned himself into one of the better face-off players. One year he wanted to be a better scorer, so he worked on his shot the entire off season. He worked on his positioning, I think, one year in terms of making sure, he was on the right side of the puck and being all that. Like, people don't even recognize what a good defensive player is. Like, he could be in the race for the Selke. And
even in every game, pretty much you watch him, he comes to the bench and he grabs that iPad right away because he wants to see what happened in the shift before, right? Because he wants to make adjustments and get better all the time.
Yeah,
that's amazing. At that age, doing as much as he's done, accomplished as much as he has, he still has that drive to get better and better all the time, man.
Yeah. The only thing, my only complaint with him, and Sidney knows this is a complaint, he doesn't like to go to the podium. He likes to do his interviews around his stall. So you can imagine there's 48, people trying to get in there, sticking their microphone under any little someone's armpit to try to get it in there, and it's really, really complicated. But he just is not. He just doesn't want that attention. He just thinks, he wants to be in the locker room, part of the guys, not up on a podium, somewhere. But that's just how he feels about it, and so he's done that. Really,
Wayne was kind of like Gretzky was kind of like that too, didn't he? Like he stayed around his stall, didn't he?
Yeah, but Wayne just did sort of accept the fact that it was convenient for everyone when he would just go to the podium, because especially later in his career, early in his career, and I remind people of this. The NHL has come so far. When I first started covering the league in the 80s, people have asked me a long time ago, the biggest changes, and I've said on this podcast, one of the things was, nobody could one time the puck the way they can now. I mean, I've estimated, I could be wrong, but I'd said about 15% of the players when I first started could really one time the puck. Yeah. So a guy like Curry really stood out. But the other thing that was completely different is when you'd walk into a dressing room, I could go and sit in Wayne's stall waiting for him till he came off the ice. And when Wayne came in, he and I would talk for 5 or 10 minutes before, maybe 8 people would come in the room. Like, it wasn't like the crush of media that we have now. And of course, our media isn't anything like we see in the NFL. You cover an NFL game, and there's 100 media members in a dressing room trying to, it's amazing. So, that was a difference as well. You got a lot more time with the stars. You weren't 15 of you or 20 of you around each player like there is now. So
what year did you start?
It depends. I started for USA Today in 1986.
86.
That's when I was the national writer. But I obviously worked prior to there. I worked at the Port Huron Times Herald, and I covered Yzerman's first training camp. I did games for the Red Wings in the early 80s. First NHL story I wrote was actually in the 1970s.
So how many stories did you write about me?
I would say either 0 or 1. Yeah. So when you became an agent, I wrote that story because you remember that? I wrote a pretty big piece about making the transition, because I really liked, you know what, we've never talked about this, but what I really liked is how refreshing your attitude was about it all. I was really kind of, I knew agents, but I found a lot of agents were very similar, and you were just different. You just had a perspective, like, Brian Burke was different as well.
Okay.
He had rules for his clients, and it was fun. And you didn't have rules, but there was just a kind of a way about you that made you a little bit different than the standard, agent. So, and again, you were coming from the player side, and you were, you had just played. Like, that's the other thing that I thought was cool. You could say, your guys, you could say, well, I played against him last year. As they were talking about it. So, just getting back to Sid, I wanted to tell just a couple more, stories. One of my favorite quotes from him, he was telling me when I was asking what it's like to be Sidney Crosby. This was probably just 3 or 4 years ago, maybe 5 years ago, right before, maybe a year before I left USA Today. And he was telling me that now if he's at a restaurant and he orders his food, that it will be, what he ordered will be on Twitter before the actual food arrives at his table. Like, someone will overhear his order and then put on Twitter. It's happened to him. Now, it doesn't happen every time, but it's happened to him where he's made his order to the waitress, and then on Twitter. And for those who don't know, Sid does not have a Sidney Crosby Twitter account, but he has a burner account. He would never tell me what it was, but he has a burner account. Now, he has subsequently said he got rid of that. I don't believe him. Yeah. So I think because he likes to know what's going on. But So, but that's what had happened. And somebody goes on Twitter and said, "Hey, I'm in a restaurant, and Sidney Crosby just ordered a filet mignon with a baked potato, no sour cream, no butter." That sort of thing. So,
another interesting same thing with Wayne Gretzky was that he liked to know what was going on too. So back in the day before computers, when I played, if we got into a city, first thing he would do is go grab a newspaper. He'd want to read what was going on in that city for this place. So same thing, he had to know what was going on. That's interesting. Yeah.
Well, with Wayne Gretzky, I know this is the case from talking to players. Bernie Nichols brought this up, but I had actually heard it before. Whenever they'd go into a bar or even a restaurant, his teammates would put Wayne in the corner, and then they would sit on the outside, so they would block. You couldn't get to Wayne, because he goes, and they didn't do it because Wayne didn't want to deal with the public. It was too intrusive for the gathering. Like, it became impossible to sit around and have a good time and laugh because people were constantly coming up. So the players sort of did it for themselves as well as for Wayne, because Wayne would just keep being nice to people. It was just the way he was. So Jeremy Roenick's also like that as well.
Yeah.
So.
It's funny. When Wayne first got there, I can't remember where we were exactly, but we're on the bus and a bunch of, we were going to go someplace after the game, and some fans, I can't remember how it all worked, but I said, "Oh yeah, we're going to this place." And so I basically told the fans where we're going. Wayne turned and looked at me like he wasn't mad at me, but it was like a learning experience. Okay, this is my first time really playing with Wayne, and I didn't think through that process. Right? I'm not going to be. We shouldn't be advertising where we're going because there's going to be enough people there anyway. So, yeah.
Right? Yeah. No. And there are all kinds of stories about Wayne, trying to see a movie somewhere, and coming up to him. It's just, it was hard being Wayne. It really was, particularly in Canada. So, well, and I've said before, I don't know that this is, I don't know if it was a major reason, but I remember walking through Detroit airport and running into Steven Stamkos, who was, actually, I was coming home to Detroit and he was connecting in Detroit, a flying commercial, to get back to Tampa. And I'm just going down, and I come up to him as thinking, "Hey, Steve," and we were just chatting, and I said, "It's just amazing here that nobody recognizes you." And he goes, "Yeah," he goes, "It's really nice." He goes, "And that's the same in Tampa." He said, "That's what I love about Tampa." Like he said, some people do, but in Tampa, they just nod to you.
Yeah.
Said, so he said, I can go out and have a nice dinner and not have it interrupted. He goes, it's a lot different in Canada, where he has to go. But one more story about Sid, and then we'll get off him. Just because I think this says a lot about Sid. As we've mentioned, he likes to know what's going on in the league. He knows everything about statistics and advanced stats, and he has his opinions about what's important and what's not. But I asked him, I said, how do you feel about advanced stats? This is early on when Corsi was just starting to be the rage. And he said to me, he goes, well, let me just tell you a story. He said, Chris Letang and he are obviously friends. And he goes, sometimes I get on the ice and Chris, the puck's down in our zone and we're starting to break out. And Chris is behind the net and he starts wheeling and he feels he's got some open ice. So Chris wheels up the ice. And of course, guys collapse on him a little bit, but he carries that puck all the way around the net and comes out. He's carried the puck the entire length of the ice. And then he comes out and he fires a shot on goal. But Chris, he can skate forever. So he goes in and he gets the rebound and takes a second shot. He goes, now we've been on the ice 35 or 40 seconds. It's time to get off. So we sit on the bench. Mike Corsi's +2 out of that. And he goes, not only didn't I touch the puck, but the only person on the team who touched the puck is Chris Letang. So he said, does that mean I'm an exceptional player? Or does that mean that, what does that really mean? He said, 4 others, actually the goalie too, 5 of us, benefited from the fact that Chris Letang saw some open ice, and he said, so, basically his point was sometimes Corsi can be misleading. So
yeah, interesting. Yeah.
Anyway, all right, let's move on. I want to get into Trouba, and here's my first take on that.
Yeah.
I think it's cool. I don't think people pay much attention when the Tampa Bay Lightning decide who their captain is, or the Carolina Hurricanes, or the Nashville Predators, or the Los Angeles Kings, or the Arizona Coyotes. I don't think that it raises any eyebrows. People care who the New York Ranger captain is.
Yeah.
And it's a big deal. That's exactly the point I want to make before we start out. This is not just the Ranger fans. People pay attention. Like, wow, tell people I'm the captain of the Rangers. Yeah. Like being the captain of the Habs or being the captain of the Toronto Maple Leafs. That's a really big deal. So I think there's
some pressure on the team, that player to be a spokesperson. So I was captain I was assistant captain, well, pretty much the whole time. Well, I guess my second year, and I was captain briefly when Barry Beck was hurt and Herb was coach. And he had gone to Anders Hedberg and said, well, Anders, I want you to be captain. And Anders goes, no, I should be captain. Tom should be captain. So I was captain for, 3/4 of the season or something like that. And there's a couple of things. Like now I speak a lot in public, but I wasn't as comfortable speaking in public. And that was one of the hard things to handle. You go to banquets or, fan club fairs, you're always talking to the media. So that's why I was a little bit surprised with Trouba, because he's not, and if you watch the press conference yesterday, I love him as a player. He plays like a captain. He plays hard like a captain. He's a leader out there, but he's not, and I don't mean this the wrong way. He just, publicly speaking, isn't something he's really comfortable doing. It doesn't appear anyways. Apparently if you watch the press conference yesterday, his wife is a doctor, and John Giannone was interviewing Trouba and started asking, well, how much does your wife mean to you? Because obviously they had been talking about how much his wife has helped him with his career. And he started crying, which there's nothing wrong with that at all. It's just that he wasn't comfortable in expressing in words how, which again, I don't hear him in the locker room, so he could be a tremendous leader in the locker room. But again, he plays like a captain. And I think there's a lot of pressure, like you're saying, to pick a captain. I don't think there was a guy that really jumped out at you. Obviously, there's no Mark Messier. Not many teams have that kind of leader. But I don't think there's really one person that really jumped out as the leader of the team. Some people suggested Kreider could have been, but I think Trouba's fine. And the thing is, too, they've got a really good leadership group there as well, with Kreider being another leader. So it isn't just going to be Trouba, although he's going to have the C on, but there's lots of leaders in that locker room, too. So interesting.
Yeah, I think we've sort of evolved in the NHL, that there's a leadership group.
Yeah.
There's a president and It's almost like his cabinet, and then there are people who don't wear letters who also are involved in the leadership group, for whatever reason they don't, or there's too many of them. So there's guys on the team that lead by example.
Kevin, just, we should be honored as well, because like the person that was like, out of the Trouba, the person that was mentioned the most, or like all the pictures, was Susan Brooks, who joins us on our show every once in a while too. Look at all the pictures. If you look online on her site, it's like she had her own private little viewing party with Jacob Trouba. I was a little bit offended. I thought I was very close to Susan, but apparently she's a little closer to Jacob Trouba than she is to me. So that's.
Yeah. Was Susan happy with the? I didn't see what you posted. Yeah. Is she happy with the choice?
I think she is very happy with the choice. Yes.
Yeah. I mean, I agree with you. I don't think it was an easy choice. It wasn't an obvious choice. I'm not Trouba. I don't think it was obvious like who it should have been. So I'm sure they gave it a lot of thought.
Because the whole year last year it was a big topic of discussion. I guess apparently they said they were going to pick a captain last year. I forgot about that. They ultimately did not. They had the 6 captains. I kind of, I don't know. They obviously had a very good season, so it didn't hurt them to not have a captain. Again, I just think it's more like you're saying, to not have a captain in the New York Rangers. It's not the end of the world, but it's very important that they have a captain. And I think,
it is, and people take note of it all. And I mean, they're a historic franchise. The other thing too, it never gets enough attention is the historic nature of Madison Square Garden. We talked, forever about the original 6 buildings, and I was fortunate enough to having covered the games in all of those buildings: Maple Leaf Gardens, the Forum, the Boston Garden. I even include Pittsburgh, Mellon Arena, the Igloo, and I just included in all that Spectrum. I was going
to say the Spectrum is kind of like that too. Yeah.
Yeah, and they're all gone, but Madison Square Garden is still there. So it's a building, and obviously that renovation that they did, sort of changed things, but still, it's still there. It's still history.
All the stuff that's gone on. The stuff that's gone on, the Billy Joel concerts, the boxing matches.
And their ice arena is still not on the ground floor. I mean, all of that is part of it. I consider that to be a very historic building.
It is. And you don't realize, for me anyways, I didn't realize how great of a building it was to call your home building until I got traded and then came back. I think I took it for granted. That was the only home building I had. And when I came back with the Kings, okay, things are all right then. Susan's reassuring me here. I have nothing to worry about. Okay, that's better.
No. But that was I think that's a good choice too. I've known Trouba. He was an American player coming up through the program, so I've had the working knowledge of him, and his game evolved. I think people thought he was going to be more offensive than he ended up being. He has that big shot. It's a heavy shot, and so I think people thought he was going to put up more points. But he's found his way as a shutdown defenseman. He is the guy you want out there. And in terms of his speaking ability, I would compare him to Shea Weber. Shea Weber was not a great orator. But he was a strong leader, and I think Trouba will do that as well. Shea Weber, I didn't look forward thinking, well, when I interviewed Shea Weber, he was going to fill me full of colorful quotes and fun things.
What I thought? He was like the John Wayne of hockey. I thought Shea Weber was, and Trouba's got some of that in him too. Like there's a couple times during the playoffs where I think it was Domi. Carolina had done something to somebody the game before. I think it was Fox. I can't remember the exact details. And early in the next game, Trouba went across the ice looking for him. I mean, I think he had to drop his gloves to get in a fight too. And he's tough. Like he hits some people. And nowadays in the National Hockey League, when you're going to hit like that, inevitably somebody's coming after you to get in the fight. He handles himself well. So he is that. Like it wasn't just random. Wasn't just random selfish plays he made. He could tell he was going to stick up for his teammate. He was going to hammer people. He did that. mean, he hit some big hits last year where people got hurt. He's just from that end, as far as a player, man, he's good. I like him a lot. And you know what? You're right. He did evolve. When he first came to the Rangers, he signed the big contract. There was all the expectations. The team was not as good as they are now. And I thought he actually tried to do too much. He was trying to carry the puck end to end. And I think a lot of the Ranger fans were kind of wondering, well, this guy isn't that good. He wasn't playing his game. And now they've got other good players around him. He has his role, and he does his role. He's fantastic. Yeah.
Yeah. What was I going to say about it? There's one group of people who will not like the decision to make him the captain. That'll be the Pittsburgh Penguins fans who don't think much of Jacob Trouba.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah, because it was their players that got crushed.
That's true. That's true too.
So,
I know we're getting late in the show here. Susan mentioned this again too. You see where Boris Salming got diagnosed with ALS? You saw that?
Yes. Yeah, for sure. And he's been, it's, they had for the longest time called it a mysterious illness. And I don't know if it's still true, but we had my wife, I think I mentioned my wife was a high school coach, and her assistant coach ended up contracting ALS and died of it. And I remember having a long conversation with his wife, and you diagnose ALS not with a test that says, positive for ALS. You rule out everything else. And then if you rule everything else out, they assume you have that. Now that's the way she explained it to me. So
he's a courageous player too. And I remember the games Toronto played against Philadelphia Flyers back then in the 70s. And no disrespect to the other guys in the team, but he was pretty much on his own. And Philadelphia was trying to kill him out there. He wouldn't back down one bit. He just kept playing hard, played physical. He was a great player.
Yeah, no, he was a terrific player, and he's been a good ambassador for the game as well. And he's been very successful as a businessman as well. That's a tough diagnosis.
Did you bring up? Is it last show or something we were going to talk about Thomas Sandstrom being a firefighter? Is that what?
Yes, he is a firefighter. I meant to look up my friend Bob Duff wrote the story about that, and I was going to ask him about it, and I forgot to. So I'll get more information about that.
Thomas Sandstrom ended up being one of my favorite teammates of all time. At first, he wouldn't speak English. We couldn't understand him. We hated him at first. He was just the biggest pain on the ice. Whenever he got on the ice, games, practice, it was the same way. Looking back at him, we totally admired him. I mean, he was going to practice the same way he played the game. We just couldn't understand him. Once you started speaking English, you realized what a great guy he was too. So that's great that he's a firefighter. That's fantastic. Yeah,
Tim Shovelday, the goalie, is also a fireman, and I think in Saskatchewan.
Is that right? Wow. Yeah. You know who was it? Rod Buskus is a pilot, I guess, too. This is interesting. That's be an interesting show right there. Get some of the former players and what their careers are now.
Yeah, well, Kovalev was, a jet rated as a pilot as well.
Was he jet rated? Oh, wow.
He was, yeah, for sure.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, he was. So there's been, a lot of guys that have kind of gone on. Back in the old days, guys had to find careers. That's not the case now. I mean, a lot of them, if they make enough money, could, live, and they invest wisely and don't, let you get fooled by, people with.
We had that charity game between the Rangers played, and they had some of the younger guys playing. Brendan Dubisky was playing, Aaron Veros was playing. So we're sitting on the bench chatting, getting to know them because we really don't know each other. And so I said to both of those guys separately, I said, "So what are you doing now for work?" They kind of looked at me sideways. It was kind of funny. Like, well, I've got investment properties. Like, okay, what do you actually work? So it's kind of fun. Yeah, they do live. There's a different world. Yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot of, I get the sense of this, and I really don't have any documentation for it. It's just a feeling from talking to, former players. A lot of them have franchises, that they've owned several of the Little Caesars franchises, or the Dunkin' or the Tim Horton franchises, or the, they own 3 Wendy's, that kind of stuff. Yeah. So. That's the way they do it, or they're involved in a conglomerate that owns some things. So
we haven't covered this in a while. Any updates on the Rabbits back in Chicago?
I don't know, but my daughter asked me that very same question yesterday. That she goes, "What's the latest on the rabbits?" Like the last that we heard, they were cohabitating. The other rabbit had, the white rabbit that showed up out of nowhere, just stayed in the cage once the original rabbit came home.
Right. So my theory is that the spaceship came down, took the original rabbit. Based on them looking at the way we run ourselves here, they thought we wouldn't notice that they had a different color rabbit in the cage. And then once they saw that we did realize there was a different color rabbit, they gave back the original rabbit. So that's my theory.
That's a good theory. It's better than anything I have. That's for sure. So anyway, go ahead.
And one more thing. So what's behind? It's not politics, but what's behind raiding Trump's place in Mar-a-Lago, or wherever that was down in Florida?
Yeah, I don't know. It sounds like I've seen reports that it's unrelated to the January 6th stuff. So it could be something as it sounds like they ended up with documents that they just shouldn't have. And that's so it could be one of these things and said, look, we're just raided it because the first time they went in, they ended up getting 10 boxes, and then someone went through. I mean, again, this is purely speculation. But maybe someone said, "Hey, we're still missing some boxes here that we didn't know that they had."
So it's got nothing to do with his hair. Like there's some special chemical he's using to keep his hair combed over like that.
Yeah, I don't think they want the secret formula for that. So I don't think they're looking for that. But boy, it sure is caused a storm. I mean, people look at this as purely politics, and what are you going to do? It's all kind of the same.
It's all politics. It's all politics nowadays. Everything is.
Yeah. You and I are apparently the only two people in the world who can have opposite political perspectives and still like each other. So that's it. It's just you and me, Tom. The rest of it, they cannot accept the other side. But we
should be careful because maybe those UFOs will come and abduct us, just like they did the rabbits too. Like they want to.
That could be. Yeah, it could be. Anyway, we really do appreciate everyone who tunes in, and we'll be back next week, and we'll talk more hockey. And it's a training camp is like the prospect camp here in Detroit, which will include like 5 teams. The Blues and the Maple Leafs and stuff, Columbus Blue Jackets. That's in 37 days, so that's 5 weeks. And then once that started, the training camps right after that. So we're just about ready to start the season, the 22-23 season. Imagine that, Tom, 22-23 season.
And 32 teams in the league now. Is that what we've got? Wow.
Yeah.
There's 21 when I played.
Yeah. No, I know. No, I mean, we used to joke about any team. If you had a valid driver's license, you got in the NHL playoffs. But now half the league misses the playoffs. Like half the league.
Can you imagine back then, like in 1990, if somebody said to us, "There's going to be in a few years, there's going to be 32 teams in National Hockey," they go, "You're nuts! You're crazy."
Yeah, 2 of them in Florida and a bunch in California and
Dallas.
Yeah, I mean, they've done a really, even though it's not nearly as big as it needs to be in terms of revenue and so forth. It's really come such a long way in terms of expanding, the footprint of the game, especially when you look at the areas of growth in women's hockey, I mean, we've seen that, and the number of non-traditional, I don't even know if we can call them non-traditional anymore, but the number of players we now take out of California, and we find players in Texas, we find them in Florida. We're getting players from
Arizona.
The geography of hockey is completely altered now from the United States from where it was.
Yeah, it used to be like 75-80% of the players in the National Hockey League were Canadian-born players, maybe even higher at some point.
No, and the U.S. now is approaching. They're not there yet, 30%. So, and if you think about it, it makes sense. There's 339 million people in America. There's 30 million in Canada. Sweden is the size of Michigan, and they send.
Is that right? That's how big Sweden is? I didn't realize.
Yeah. And they look at all the number of people that they send. Yeah, I mean, I was really shocked. One of the things I learned from the war in the Ukraine is that there are only 190 million people in Russia. It seems like they're an enormous
Yeah.
country, but they're, after the breakup, the Soviet Union had more people.
Right.
But after the breakup, they're down to 190 million.
Wow.
Because all those places that used to be counted as, for us, Russia, what was really the Soviet Union.
Yeah.
And all these other countries like like 40 million people, I think, in Germany.
Finland,
so,
all those smaller places. Yeah.
So
all right.
Anyway,
So
if you want to meet me at DetroitHockeyNow.com and HockeyBuzz.com.
And if you'd like to listen to the radio version of this show, you can go to radio.co at 365 Sports. Everybody have a great weekend. We'll see you on Monday.